I figure that 2/3 of it is always a good way to go. I'm also going to clean up my bowl here a little bit so I'm ready for when it comes time to put it back in the bowl. I'm just going to set that aside. You'll notice I always have a rag sitting here. I always put my bowl on a rag to insulate it from the table to keep it from getting too cold. From there, we're going to spread the chocolate out. And the marble will start to absorb some of the heat from this chocolate. Now granted, your stainless steel will do the same thing. But a thing to be aware of with any chocolate is that on a hot day, if it's really warm in the kitchen, you're going to have a hard time tempering because it's so warm. If it's above 88 degrees Fahrenheit, it could actually, just having the chocolate out could throw it out of temper. If it's above 91 degrees, it could really go out. It could melt the chocolate just from the heat of the room. So I've actually been known to temper chocolate in the walk-in refrigerator during the hot weather, for instance, in August. I'll go in there and temper it. And it takes me a few minutes in there. After it's had a chance to absorb some of the cold from the marble, I'm just going to scrape it up. As I scrape, you'll notice how I work. I work from the outside to the center. I scrape and I clean it off with my other tools, so I kind of hold my offset spatula in such a position where I can take my tool and scrape it off. I like to keep my tool kind of free of just liquid chocolate. I like to kind of keep it clean as much as I can. And I'll spread it out again. The process of spreading it and the process of scraping it back up is your agitation. That's where your agitation comes from. I scrape with a fair amount of pressure too. The chocolate is hardening on the marble, and to get all of that good chocolate up off the marble, you've got to put your weight into it a little bit. I put a little bit of strength into it. It does work quickly when the marble is chilly like this. And you would think, on a day like today, it's nice and warm outside, that the marble wouldn't be all that cool. But in this room, it's been like an ice box all day.
Yeah.
That's really good for tempering chocolate, though. I hope they keep it up, when it comes to working with chocolate, because we'll be having to run down to the walk-in otherwise. I always thought it was funny, I'd mention that, and the next thing I know, I've got 5 students down in the walk-in trying to temper their chocolate on a warm day. And it's always fun to watch because everybody's going in and out. People are grabbing jackets, all kinds of things. But it works. If the room is reasonably cool, though, tempering is fairly easy. You're going to notice the chocolate getting thicker rather, and you're going to notice it starting to get a slight bit lumpy as it goes from one spreading to the next on this chocolate.
I'm surprised they don't have better temperature control for the kitchens.
Well, they do, and yet we have our own unit on the roof. Mm-hmm. Although we're partly controlled by the building too. The building has its own heating and air conditioning system. Now, as I start scraping this up, you're going to start noticing it getting almost about as thick as ganache, maybe as thick as pastry cream. And as it starts to get a little bit lumpy, that's where I start to get ready to take it off the marble. What I'm going to do eventually is, as it gets cool, I want to get this down to a temperature where it is cold enough so that when I add it back to the warm chocolate, it'll bring both of these together and it'll arrive at about 84 to 86 degrees, right where it needs to be. In the meantime, see, all what's going on here on the table is that the beta crystals are starting to crystallize really quickly. The temperature of this chocolate is dropping quickly, and we're getting a lot of good seed out of this by cooling it down so rapidly on the marble. Once we add that seed to the main bowl, it's going to cause the rest of the bowl to become tempered. So I think it's getting about thick enough. It's starting to really thicken up now. Clean off my tool. Get my marble ready. When I go to take this off of here, I just scrape it up to the edge. just quickly zip right into the bowl. I try to work clean as much as I can. Ideally, if everything goes well, you won't get any chocolate on yourself. You won't drop chocolate on the floor. You know, those kinds of things won't happen. But, you know, it sometimes takes a little practice to get it to a point where you don't get dirty at all. Now, this chocolate was cold, so now it's going in here with the rest of the chocolate. I've got no lumps, which is really nice. We're going to have to find out if it's really intemperate. The only way we can know for sure is if we test it. So, even though it's mixed together and it should be intemperate, I've got to know for sure if what I did on the marble actually caused a chain reaction to occur in the bowl of chocolate, and to see if the whole thing became temperate. Usually, if you can get what's on the marble cooled down fast enough, and thicken enough, it will come in here and it will influence the rest of the chocolate and put the whole thing in temperate. The way I test it, of course, with a spoon. I'm just going to scrape off a little bit here. We'll set this on the marble and just let it sit. I use a spoon, even though it's on the marble. You might be thinking, well, won't that cold of the marble influence the chocolate that's on the spoon and make your test invalid? Well, you would think so. And if I put it flat on the marble, it might. But there's air underneath that spoon, and that helps keep the temperature fairly stable. The plastic is pretty inert. It doesn't really have any temperature except for the temperature of the room. So I think it's pretty reliable. But I know a lot of people who test with a piece of parchment paper. They'll take a little strip of paper, dip it in there, put it right on the marble. The cold from the marble comes up through the paper, and that can invalidate your test. Your test will suddenly become very hard and very quickly, and you think, oh wow, it's intemperate. Well, maybe, maybe not. You know, you have to kind of judge it based on what you see on a reliable test. So I'm watching this very carefully. Anybody remember how many minutes it takes to do a test?
1 to 2.
Yeah, usually about 1 to 2 minutes. Usually we'll see a change. What I'm looking for here is on this spoon, this chocolate is fairly glossy, and I'm looking for the gloss to start to soften a little bit, and looking for it to start turning a little bit dull. If it starts to change, what that dullness means is that the crystals are hardening. If they're hardening on their own at room temperature, I know it's intemperate. If it won't harden and it stays glossy for 35 minutes, then I know I've got a problem. I probably didn't temper it enough, and it isn't doing it reliably. Right now I can see certain parts of it starting to lose its gloss a little bit, but it feels like it's about right. It's pretty close. The only thing is, I think it's on the very warmer side of being temperate. So I think the temperature, based on what I'm feeling, is probably up around 86 or 88 degrees. So warm that it's taking a long time for it to cool down enough to demonstrate that it's intemperate. One thing I can tell for sure is that the chocolate here on the marble is getting hard on its own. So it's hardening up just fine. And that tells me that at least what I put in the bowl is probably reliably crystallized to do the job. But to be absolutely sure, what I have to do is just give it a minute here and see if it'll do its thing where it's supposed to do it. In the meantime, I'll clean off my tools here. Clean off my marble a little bit. It's close.